not basically taking your money out of the continent, not illicit financial flows or any other type of financial flows.
Good evening. Welcome to the State of the Nation on the State of the Nation. I'm your host, Mike Sham. We are joined, Kuhle and Ngcamane. He's going to be joining us shortly. We are going to be taking you through President Ramaphosa's opening of Parliament State of the Nation address, analysing it as we go, and we'll be back to give you a short introduction as to what we can possibly expect to hear tonight. And but in the meantime, settle in. Soak up the atmosphere of the State of the Nation, and we'll be ready to go in a few minutes as soon as the President arrives.
Yeah, and they're attacking me in their parliament, you know? You don't want that kind of
and to
thing.
add to what
all right, the President is arriving, definitely. As you can see, those are about 37, if I'm not mistaken. That was what was described to me by one of the captains in the SANDF during the inauguration and later the opening of Parliament last year, that he would be preceded by 37 motorcycles. Those horses, definitely the President arriving.
You know, I know there was people saying, oh, he was toned down, the military presence and stuff, but this geopolitical stuff you've just been talking about and this tension, this is a very good show. This is a good show.
Yeah.
That the defense force is here, the commander-in-chief is here, and we're going nowhere, and we are proudly the defense force, and we honor it. This is the President, Matamela, Cyril Ramaphosa, arriving now. That's the motorcade, as Masiho was telling you, how it's led by those 30-odd motorcyclists coming in from defense. So there you have it.
Cavalcade that is leading the President, and then there'll obviously be the aides de camp that will give the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, which is attached, of course, to the President. They'll be saluting him before he's received by the Speaker of Parliament as well as the Chairperson of the NCOP.
Yeah, they are already standing by the... But we're going to be on time. It looks like it's happening right on time. There you have it.
Has he arrived with his daughter?
Yeah, it looks like it. Looks like it.
Yes, those are one of his daughters.
It's one of his daughters. The President and one of his daughters arriving there. There's Togo Titiza, the Speaker. I think we're going to go and listen now to the next parts. Let's take you there now. Let's listen in.
Right, as the national anthem plays in the background, we're going to wait out of respect, hear our national anthem. Right, as President Cyril Ramaphosa takes a military salute, the anthem's been played, the scene is set. It looks like for the first time in a while the State of the Nation is going to run on time, which is already showing a bit of a change from recent past. I have my guest with me today, and that is our political insider, Mr. Kuhle Ngcamane, who's going to help us have a look at what we can expect out of this State of the Nation, and then we'll do the analysis as we get the actual President's address, and talk about, what the implications are for the country. So, Kuhle, the State of the Nation, welcome to our State of the Nation on the State of the Nation.
Where it originally started.
We're the home of the State of the Nation, but we'll let them use it for the day. It comes at the top of quite an awkward time for South Africa in many respects. We've had the issues of soldiers in the DRC, which we've analysed, and the sort of geopolitical fallout from that. It also happens, this will also be the first State of the Nation address since the formation of the Government of National Unity. And needless to say, there is also the onslaught of Donald Trump coming out of America, testing many of the South African government stances on quite a few issues. But looking ahead at the State of the Nation, what is it that we can we expect? Let's start off with our old friend, where even this brand started back in the old days. Do we expect disruption of the State of the Nation?
For this State of the Nation, I'm actually predicting, from what I've heard, purely from voices in Ngcamane, so that they are saying that Jacob Zuma could possibly arrive late. This is basically what I've heard, and it's in a way to cause disruption. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what role the MK play during the State of the Nation as an official opposition, because they did also make mention of the fact that they will have their real State of the Nation, which is going to come after Cyril Ramaphosa's. So I'm actually interested to know, will there be disruptions? I highly doubt it, but this State of the Nation will be a different State of the Nation. It's going to be one where Ramaphosa finds himself in a beleaguered situation. It's one where there's a lot of explaining to do versus selling a dream. It's one where he's got to touch on the DRC. We know that there is going to be a commemoration for the 14th fallen soldiers, but it's still a question to know, will the EFF, MK possibly disrupt in that regard, regarding the fallen soldiers in the DRC or regarding the Trump situation? So it's a very interesting State of the Nation address. I am not sure if he's going to highlight this. I've not heard word yet, but it would be interesting to see if he does touch on some of these critical issues.
Yeah, it's been a hallmark of this State of the Nation. Very often when we have State of the Nation addresses, much like the budget, we get to hear a lot of inside information. They come out to the press, warn people, do a sort of a soft sell. Expect this, expect that, so that we don't have too many wild surprises. This time it's been surprisingly quiet.
No, true. I think why it's been quiet is it's a GNU, so now there are more parties that are actually part of government, and it would be hypocritical of them to go and complain about government or make so much noise as they are part of government.
Yeah. And I think we also have to give some discussion to the fact that within the GNU, this comes at a critical time of the GNU. We've seen the other member parties within the GNU getting quite upset with some of the behavior of the ANC passing some bills into law that were maybe highly contestable. So I think that it's going to be very interesting to see whether President Ramaphosa has taken heed of the unhappiness of the GNU partners. On the disruption, it was one of the lines that the MK came in with, saying they're not going to be the party of disruption.
I mean, if you look at this now, Mike, this is going to be the first year or political year that really tests the GNU. It's like what we said in our last episode, where now this is the first time the GNU gets to actually impose their policies, you know, and actually go to a drawing table at the next Cabinet Lekgotla and say, okay, what is it? Or if this was actually discussed in the last Cabinet Lekgotla, who knows? But what is it? What is our plan for this political year? What are the successes that we want to achieve in this year? What are the long-term visions, especially for each department? So now remember that we always said back in the past, you had ANC in almost all positions except for Patricia de Lille in tourism. Now you've got DA and ANC and various parties in different departments, which means that there's going to be a big question on budgets. So expect budgets to increase because each department that is run by these different parties would like to be more effective. So I would be expecting a huge increment in especially public works. That's what I'm looking at, because Dean McPherson, from what I know and from what I've heard, he really wants to get on the ground and really needs a healthy budget to also... we started?
My goodness, we're going to start ahead of time. But yeah, certainly those budgetary issues, that's going to be a bigger issue around the budget in a few weeks' time. Let's see what President Ramaphosa has to say to us, and let's listen in.
Order, honorable members. Order, honorable members, can we please take our seats? Honorable members. Honorable members, can we please take your seat and allow the President to address the House and the nation.
Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Toko Didiza, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Refilwe Ngcamane, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Paul Mashatile, Chief Justice of the Republic, Mandri Samaya, and Judges President, former President of the Republic, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, former President Kgalema Motlanthe, former Deputy President David Mabuza, former Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Baleka Mbete, former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Lichisa Tsinodi, and former Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mr. Amos Masondo, Mayor of the City of Cape Town, Mr. Gordon Hill-Lewis, Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, Regional Deans, and Heads of Missions, Members of Parliament, and fellow South Africans. We gather here as we mourn the death and tragic death and devastating loss of 14 South African soldiers who were part of a mission to bring peace to the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. We pay tribute and bow our heads to Staff Sergeant William Eddie Ola, Staff Sergeant Mulahlehi Ishmael Mulahlehi, Staff Sergeant Shohlane Theophilus Siepe, Corporal Matume Justice Malisa, Corporal Renae Nemabulani, Lance Bombardier Itumeleng McDonald Mureo, Lance Corporal Tseke Moffat Molapo, Lance Corporal Metsi Stensley Raswiswi, Rifleman Sibatane Richard Chokwe, Rifleman Derek Maluleke, Rifleman Sidiso Andris Mabele, Rifleman Calvin Louis Moahi, Rifleman Moketi Joseph Mobe, Private Peter Jacobus Strado. Speaker, I thank you for getting us to honor these fallen heroes. I have directed that a national flag be flown at half-mast in honor of these fallen heroes for a week starting from tomorrow morning. Alongside soldiers from other southern African countries, they lost their lives in defense of the fundamental right of the Congolese people to live in peace and security. They lost their lives not in the pursuit of resources or territory or power. They lost their lives so that the guns on our continent may be forever silenced. So we salute them. My fellow South Africans, this State of the Nation address is taking place as we celebrate 70 years since the adoption of the Freedom Charter at the Congress of the People in Kliptown in 1955. The Freedom Charter is the cornerstone of our democratic constitution. It sets out a vision of a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic and prosperous South Africa. It also sets out a vision of a country in which government is founded on the will of the people of South Africa, where the land is shared among those who work it, where the people share in the country's wealth and in all that the country produces and are all equal before the law. It is this vision that continues to guide us as we work to build the nation that we all want. It is the spirit of the Congress of the People that inspires us as we prepare for a national dialogue in which South Africans are once again called upon to chart a new path for our country. We must chart this path in a world that is rapidly changing. It is a world of both interdependence and competition, of cooperation and conflict. It is a multipolar world in which new countries are emerging to play a greater role in global affairs. We are seeing intensifying competition over issues such as trade, technology, and influence in global institutions. There are global fundamental shifts underway that affect every aspect of human life, from the growing impact of climate change to rapid advances in artificial intelligence, geopolitical tensions, and violent conflicts. In the face of these challenges, we are witnessing the rise of nationalism, protectionism, the pursuit of narrow interests, and the decline of common cause. This is the world that we, as South Africa, a developing economy, must now navigate. But we are not daunted to navigate our path through this world that constantly changes. We will not be deterred. We are, as South Africans, a resilient people, and we will not be bullied. We will stand together as a united nation, and we will speak with one voice in defense of our national interests, our sovereignty, and our constitutional democracy. By standing true to our values, by harnessing our unique strengths and endowments, and by forging a common purpose, we can turn these trying circumstances to our advantage and propel our country forward. As South Africans, we stand for peace and justice. We stand for equality and solidarity. We stand for a non-racial future, and we stand for democracy and tolerance as well as compassion. We stand for equal rights for women, for persons with disability, and for members of the LGBTQIA+ community. We stand for our shared humanity, not for the survival of the fittest. So this evening, let us speak of the nation that we want. Let us speak of the future that we want to build. Let us speak of the work that we as South Africans must do, and the work that we are doing to build that nation and to build that future. We want a nation united in its diversity. At many difficult moments in our past, we found strength in working together towards a common goal. Through partnership, we brought peace and democracy to our country, which was once troubled. We overcame apartheid, a crime against humanity that denied people their human rights, that deprived them of the land and livelihoods, that sought to strip them of their dignity, that humiliated them. Through partnership, we overcame a devastating pandemic and rebuilt our country in the wake of state capture as well. Together, we have built durable institutions that support our democracy, that protect our fundamental rights and promote the well-being of South Africans. We have built meaningful partnerships between government and business and labor and civil society and other social partners to drive growth and development. These stand as models of cooperation for the rest of the world. South Africans are continuing to work together to confront our country's challenges and build a nation that works for all. Guided by the wishes of the people as expressed in last year's elections, we have formed a government of national unity to give expression to our culture of cooperation. As political parties, we have set aside our differences and agreed to work together for the good of all South Africans. In the last week, we have adopted the Medium-Term Development Plan, which sets out a clear and ambitious program for the next 5 years. The actions contained in the Medium-Term Development Plan will advance our 3 strategic priorities. Firstly, to drive inclusive growth and job creation. Secondly, to reduce poverty and tackle the high cost of living. And thirdly, to build a capable, ethical and developmental state. Our most urgent task is to grow our economy so that we can create jobs, reduce poverty and improve the lives of South Africans. To undertake this task, we need a government that works for the people. We need a state that is capable, competent, underpinned by a professional public service. South Africans want a state that treats all people with dignity, humility, and respect. A state with leaders who are prepared to serve our people with complete dedication, and public servants who are ethical, skilled, and properly qualified. To achieve these objectives, we are strengthening the role of the Public Service Commission in the appointment of key people who direct the affairs of our state, such as Directors General, Deputy Directors General, Chief Executive Officers of SOEs and board members and other senior positions. We will introduce a graduate recruitment scheme so that we may attract the best and the brightest in the public service. A capable state must start where our people live and work. In many cities and towns across our country, roads are not maintained. Water and electricity supply is often disrupted. Refuse is not collected, and sewage runs in the streets. In part, this has happened because many municipalities lack the technical skills and resources required to meet our people's needs. Many municipalities have not reinvested the revenue they earn or collect from these services into the upkeep of infrastructure. Starting this year, we will work with our municipalities to establish professionally managed ring-fenced utilities for water and electricity services to ensure that there is adequate investment and maintenance. Many of the challenges in municipalities also arise from the design of our local government system. We will therefore undertake extensive consultation to develop an updated white paper on local government to outline a modern and fit-for-purpose local government system. We will also review the funding model for municipalities. We will do so because many of our municipalities truly do not have a viable and sustainable revenue base. We will work with traditional leaders in the implementation of local development programs. We will also seek to work with our traditional leaders in ensuring that they continue their own work as we give them the recognition as the natural and indigenous leaders of our people. We will expand our support to municipalities that require assistance, drawing on the lessons of the Presidential eThekwini Working Group. We are seeing great progress in eThekwini as we implement the district development model, which enables all key role players, as in government, business, labor, and community-based organizations, to work together. As we work to reform the public service and build the capability of the state, we will harness technology to transform the way government works. We will invest in digital public infrastructure to give South Africans access to government services anytime, anywhere, through a relaunched gov.za platform. At the heart of this transformation will be the implementation of a digital identity system. Now, these measures will in the end transform the relationship between citizens and government and create one government that is accessible to every person at a touch. We want a nation with a thriving economy, an economy that benefits all. To create this virtuous cycle of investment, growth and jobs, we must lift economic growth to above 3%. To achieve higher levels of economic growth, we are undertaking massive investment in new infrastructure while upgrading and maintaining the infrastructure that we have. We're developing innovative ways of funding infrastructure. We are engaging local and international finance institutions and investors to unlock 100 billion rand in infrastructure financing. A project preparation bid window has been launched to fast-track investment readiness. This includes revised regulations for public-private partnerships, which will unlock private sector expertise and funds. And government will spend more than 940 billion rand on infrastructure over the next 3 years. Now, this includes 375 billion rand in spending by state-owned enterprises. This funding will revitalize our roads and bridges. It will build dams and waterways. It will modernize our ports and airports and also power our economy. Through the infrastructure fund that we launched some time ago, 12 blended finance projects worth nearly 38 billion rand have been approved in the last year. These are projects in water and sanitation, student accommodation, transport, health and energy as well. Construction of the M10 bridge in the Eastern Cape, the construction continues. This bridge will rise above the river between Port Edward
Just
and
a quick
Lusikisiki,
insert here. You brought up something, Kuhle, something you said the other day on the State of the Nation.
Right. Already President Cyril Ramaphosa has said that we're going to spend 940 billion rand over infrastructure over the next 3 years. Now, I'm partially excited because this was a prediction that we had, that he's going to focus on the ports, which he has spoken about, the harbors, the airports. So he says we're going to work on upgrading the airports, particularly George in the Western Cape, and the 3 main airports, King Shaka, Cape Town, and OR Tambo, as well as improving on the current infrastructure. So that is very exciting to hear. And like I said, that this is a completely different state of the nation. You can see in terms of where the priority is, local government. He touched on local government. A new white paper is going to be interesting to read what that white paper contains. But essentially, what President Ramaphosa is doing right now is actually dealing with the problems that we have in our country, which is local government, because local government is the root to most of the problems that we have in this country. Yeah. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, it does sound a bit like there may be local government elections coming, eh? But generally quite a few people talking about the fact that it sounds like he's just hauled out last year's speech. A lot of it is the same. It's a few of the details that may be a little different.
No, but this time, I don't know why. I mean, I got to see Dean McPherson's face, and I saw his smile. His face just turned into a smiley face, because after you had this 940 billion budget, I mean, now the work really lies in his hands to really implement, And we've also got to look at education. I'm actually waiting for him to speak about education because Cyril Kuhle's department is also grossly underfunded. So I'm also hoping to hear what he has to say about education.
Let's go back to hear what else the President has to say.
Social partners, we must now finish the work that we started. Over the coming year,
just sent me the
we will initiate a second wave of reform to unleash more rapid and inclusive growth. Our immediate focus is to enable Eskom, Transnet and other state-owned enterprises that are vital to our economy to function optimally. We are repositioning these entities to provide world-class infrastructure while enabling competition in operations, whether in electricity generation, freight, rail, or port terminals. We continue with the fundamental reform of our state-owned enterprises to ensure that they can effectively fulfill their social and economic mandates. Now, this includes the work underway to put in place a new model to strengthen governance and oversight of our public entities. We will ensure public ownership of strategic infrastructure for public benefit while finding innovative ways to attract private investment, to improve services, and to ensure public revenue can be focused on the provision of public services. We are in the process of establishing a dedicated SOE reform unit to coordinate this work. The measures we have implemented through the Energy Action Plan have reduced the severity and frequency of load shedding, with more than 300 days without load shedding since March 2024. Now, while the return of load shedding for 2 days last week was a reminder that our energy supply is still constrained, we remain on a very positive trajectory, whether people like it or not. We now need to put the risk of load shedding behind us once and for all. And the Minister of Electricity will speak about it in about 2 weeks or so when he presents to Parliament. We need to put that once and for all behind us by completing the reform of our energy system to ensure long-term energy security. The Electricity Regulation Amendment Act, which came into effect on the 1st of January, marks the beginning of a new era in our energy architecture. This year, we will put in place the building blocks of a competitive electricity market. Over time, this will allow multiple electricity generation entities to emerge and to compete. We will mobilize private sector investment in our transmission network to connect more renewable energy to the grid. The Minister will tell us that we still need to install 14,000 kilometers of transmission lines. We therefore need to mobilize finance from a number of sources to enable this to happen. As we reform our energy system, we are continuing to build successful multilateral partnerships in the global effort to halt the devastating impact of climate change. Our just energy transition is gaining momentum. Over $13 billion have been pledged by the international community, and significant private capital is being invested locally. We are determined to meet our carbon reduction commitments and will do so at a pace and at a scale that our country can afford.
If that one statistic of needing to build 14,000 kilometers of transmission line sounds familiar, I went through President Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address of last year, and we needed to build 14,000 kilometers of transmission lines 1 year ago, which means that for the past year, 0 kilometers of transmission line built.
Performance has stabilized.
Back to the President.
And is steadily improving. We released a network statement in December last year, which for the first time will enable private rail operators to access the freight rail system that will continue to be owned by the state. Open access to the rail network will allow train operation companies to increase the volume of goods transported by rail, while our network infrastructure remains state-owned. This will ensure that South African minerals, the vehicles that we manufacture, our agricultural produce reach international markets, securing jobs and earning much-needed revenue for our fiscus. New cranes and other port equipment are being commissioned to speed up the loading and unloading of cargo and reduce waiting times for ships in our various ports. As we forge ahead with the reform agenda, an urgent priority is to ensure a secure and reliable supply of water across the country. Many people in our cities, towns, and villages are experiencing more and more frequent water shortages as a result of failing water infrastructure. It is impossible to live without water, as we all know, and it is impossible for the economy to grow without water. We are therefore taking a series of decisive actions to resolve the water crisis, to enable our people to get water where they live, whether in townships or in the rural areas. We are investing heavily in expanding our water resources. Wherever one goes in our country, we often hear our citizens raising the issue of water continuously. So we are raising this issue to a much higher level, and like we did with electricity, I know and I am hopeful that we will resolve the water crisis that we have. Loko famba uya atindaweni to tala ukuma ku ri vakhegulu va rila hi yona mhaka leyi ya mati, va ku byela ku ri hi hava mati, hi lava ku ri hulumeni a hi tisela mati, hi ta swi endla sweleswo. Hi lava ku ri mi tiva kahle laha mi nga tshama kona ku ri mati a ta va kona, hi ta wa tisa mi wa kuma. To date, the Infrastructure Fund has secured 23 billion rand for 7 large water infrastructure projects. We have ended delays in major water infrastructure projects like Phase 2 of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project and the Ngcamane Dam. Work is underway to prepare for construction of the Ntabelanga Dam on the Umzimvubu River to supply additional water for domestic use as well as for irrigation in the Eastern Cape. Within the next year, we will complete the establishment of the National Water Resource Infrastructure Agency to unlock much greater investment in water projects. Through the Water Services Amendment Bill, we will introduce a licensing system for water service providers and remove licenses where providers do not meet the standards for quality drinking water. As part of our reform agenda, we will ensure that our focus on water is intensive and it speeds up. As we move ahead with our reform processes, we will continue to enhance our visa system to make it easier for skilled people to invest in our country and to grow tourism. This year, we will launch the electronic travel authorization system to enable a secure, fully digital visa application process. Now, this system will use artificial intelligence and automation to reduce the scope of corruption and enable rapid turnaround times for tourist visas. We have cleared over 90% of the backlog of more than 300,000 visa applications. Now, in many ways, these changes that are underway, these reforms that we're implementing, send a very strong message that South Africa is indeed open for business and tourism. As we open for tourism, the Chinese market, the Indian market, the market in the Middle East, the market in Europe and all over are waiting to come as tourists to our country. We want a nation in which prosperity and opportunity is shared by all. For many decades, our economy has been held back by the exclusion of the vast majority of South Africa's people. Black South Africans were deprived of land, of capital, of skills, and of opportunities. Our economy was starved of the potential that it has. And this is why we need to transform our economy and to make it more inclusive. That is why our focus is on empowering our people, on empowering women and persons with disabilities, because they were deliberately excluded from playing a role in the economy of their own country. And we will set up a transformation fund worth 20 billion rand a year over the next 5 years to fund black-owned and small business enterprises. We will fast-track the regulations of the Public Procurement Act to ensure that businesses that are owned by women, by young people, and persons with disabilities receive equitable opportunities in government contracts. And we have started and will continue to train women entrepreneurs to enable them to compete for government tenders. In November last year, we launched the National Skills Fund Disabilities Program. In its first phase, this transformative initiative will empower over 10,000 persons with disabilities through tailoring training for them and through ensuring that they get stipends and specialized tools. This part of the work we must undertake as business, as government and labor and civil society to enable people with disabilities to play an important role in the economy of our country. For far too long, they've been relegated to the back rooms of everything. Through these programs, we are not only righting a grave historical wrong, we are unleashing the potential of our economy for sustained growth. We want a nation where there is work for all, where every person can earn a decent living and realize their potential, where the rights of workers are protected and working conditions are improved, where women and men receive equal pay for work of equal value. We need to ensure that growth creates jobs for all, and especially for young people. The success of the presidential employment stimulus shows how public employment programs can create meaningful work that generates a wider benefit and contributes to sustainable employment. The employment stimulus that we introduced during the COVID period has created almost 2.2 million work and livelihood opportunities through innovative models that provide high-quality work to participants. The Social Employment Fund has created over 80,000 jobs this year. It has supported more than 12,000 participants to enter entrepreneurial activities. During the past year, young people secured 235,000 work opportunities through the National Pathway Management Network. And this is underpinned by the SA Youth Mobi platform. We now need to build on these innovative programs to create jobs for young people at ever greater scale. And to create jobs, we must leverage our unique strengths as well as our unrealized potential to build the industries of the future, as in green manufacturing, renewable energy, electrical vehicles, and the digital economy that is also driven by artificial intelligence. This year, we will finalize a modernized and comprehensive industrial policy that drives economic growth. We will achieve this ambition by focusing on the opportunities in localization, diversification, digitization, and decarbonization. We're working towards the full implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which will tear down the barriers to trade on our continent. As the most industrialized economy on the African continent, we are positioning ourselves to be at the center of this new growing market. We are harnessing the sun and the wind to make our country a leader in renewable energy and green manufacturing. With an abundance of cheap green energy, we can produce products that are competitive anywhere in the world and create hundreds of thousands of new jobs in this process. We are making sustainable use of the rich abundance of the South African earth by supporting our farmers, improving our logistics network and rural supply chains, and opening new export markets for products that we grow or produce. We can significantly expand our agricultural sector. We want South Africa to be leading in the commercial production of products such as hemp and cannabis, a product that is so well known in the Eastern Cape and KZN, a product that our forebears have produced for generations and generations. We can add modern value to it and bring it to the shelves of the entire world. We are breathing new life into the mining industry, which remains one of our most important and valuable endowments. I often say that mining was the bedrock on which our economy was built, and it continues to be a sunrise industry. We are on track to implement a new, modern and transparent mining rights system this year, which will unlock investment in exploration and production. We will put in place an enabling policy as well as a regulatory framework for critical minerals. By beneficiating these minerals here in South Africa, we can make use of the extraordinary wealth that lies beneath our soil for the benefit of our people. Even more valuable than our natural resources are the diversity, the energy and the talent of the people of this country. The services sector is now the largest part of our economy, ranging from financial services to retail, hospitality, tourism, and the burgeoning in creative industry. The tourism sector is growing rapidly, with close on to 9 million tourists having visited our country last year. One of the attractive sites in our country, which we want to see growing more and more, is Robben Island. I visited Robben Island on the 8th of January. And I got to hear that in a year they are now going to receive 300,000. They want to grow it to 500,000 visitors in a year. And most of these visitors are South Africans. So we will grow tourism through our visa reforms, through increasing the number of flights to key destinations, and through the marketing of our country as the best country to visit in the world. And we have also seen strong growth in digital services, as well as business process outsourcing, as well as data centers. As the need
Mike,
for data
one disappointing thing so far
grows in
as
the
we approach
world,
the end of the speech
our country
is the
is
fact that
seen
President Ramaphosa has
as a
not touched
reservoir
on government
of,
debt compared to our
having
GDP.
data
I was
centers.
hoping he was going
And
to touch on
this
that.
has-
And
is
there's
continuing
been
to
no
create
part
jobs
where he
for
has
young
spoken about
people.
how we're going to eradicate
To
debt. He's
support
only
this
spoken
growth,
on
we
economic
are
growth,
investing
but
in
there's still the huge
skills
elephant in the
development
room of
for the
this debt,
industries
which
of
is
the
sitting at
future.
about 75.1%
The Jobs
of our current
Boost
GDP.
Fund has
Well,
pioneered
he's
a
got a
new
couple of
model
minutes. Let's see if
that
he says
links
anything about it.
funding
It's not,
for
no, we're not
skills
hopeful.
in demand
He
for
did
the
pass his
successful
100
placement
billion rand
and particularly
sweetheart deal
employment
for
of young
his
people.
comrades. But let's
We are
let's
expanding our
analyze
support
this when we're done.
for small and medium enterprises and for the informal economy, which sustains millions of jobs as well as livelihoods across our country. This includes streamlining funding for small businesses, unlocking venture capital for high-growth startups, and developing a regulatory environment that enables rather than restricts informal enterprises. To build an innovative economy, the Department of Science and Technology and Innovation will establish an innovation fund to provide venture capital to tech startups that emerge from our higher education institutions. We are calling on business to use the SA Youth Mobi platform, which currently has some 4.5 million young people registered for their hiring purposes. We're calling on business to support the Youth Employment Service to scale up workplace experience opportunities over the coming year. We want a nation where no one goes hungry. For 30 years, since the dawn of democracy, we have worked together to reduce poverty. Today, our country spends around 60% of our national budget on the social wage, on health, on education, on social protection, community development, and public employment programs. More than 28 million unemployed and vulnerable people in our country receive social assistance. More than 10.5 million learners go to public schools where they do not have to pay fees. Last year, over 900,000 students from poor working-class backgrounds and poor families and working-class backgrounds received funding to study at universities and colleges. Now, through these programs, we are alleviating the worst effects of poverty. We are providing the means through which South Africans can rise above poverty that has been passed down from one generation to the next. But we have much to do, and much more work needs to be done to end poverty in our country. We must do much more to ensure that women in particular no longer face the hopeless task to feed and clothe their children. While government invests heavily to support poor and unemployed people, these programs are fragmented and sometimes they are difficult to access. We are therefore building an integrated system of support for poor and unemployed people. We are strengthening existing programs from job search support to public employment and making sure that together they provide people with pathways out of poverty. Rather than expecting those in need to approach several government agencies separately, a citizen should be able to go to one place to receive all the support that they need. To protect the gains that we have made since 1994 in advancing children's rights, we will adopt the National Strategy to Accelerate Action for Children, which focuses on 10 key priorities, including poverty reduction, child protection, and addressing malnutrition. The Social Relief Distress Grant is an essential mechanism for alleviating extreme poverty, of a more sustainable form of income support for unemployed people. Now, central to our efforts to end poverty and to develop our economy is to provide decent, quality education to every South African. We are immensely proud of the achievements of the matric class of 2024. It's a class which achieved the highest pass rate in our country's history. Now, 87% of learners who sat for their matric exams passed. For the first time in the history of our country, nearly half of these learners achieved bachelor pass. Nothing can diminish, frankly, nothing can diminish our pride in the hard work of these learners and the steady support of their teachers, parents, and broader community. And let us give them a big round of applause. We should all be proud of the class of 2024. But our immediate focus is to expand access to early childhood development for every child. Now this will be achieved through registering and formalizing existing ECD centers and ensuring that they have the facilities, the training and material that they need to provide quality learning. We will focus on ensuring that every child can read for meaning in the foundation phase to set them up for success in later years. To achieve this, we are implementing mother tongue-based bilingual education. We do this to improve literacy and numeracy, and rolling out lessons plans, reading books, and other interventions that have been proven to work. The Funza Rushaka bursary scheme will continue to prioritize students who want to pursue a teaching career in the foundation phase. Last year, we signed the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, which was passed by this Parliament. Now, this act is pivotal for ensuring that education is accessible and is inclusive for all South Africans. This year, the Minister of Basic Education will introduce national policy, the norms and the standards and regulations to empower all partners in the basic education field to support the implementation of the Act. Now, to ensure that the economy has the skills that it needs, we are increasing the production of artisans through TVET colleges. Now, this is part of the shift we are undertaking towards education and skills development that combines formal learning with job training. Now, drawing on the models that have proven to be so successful in other countries, we're calling on the private sector to offer young people experiential learning opportunities while they undertake their studies. We are implementing phase 1 of the comprehensive student funding model for higher education to address the needs of the missing middle. This will support approximately 10,000 students in the first year. We want a nation in which there is quality health care for all. This year, we will proceed with the preparatory work for the establishment of the National Health Insurance. Now, this This includes developing the first phase of a single electronic health record system, the preparatory work to establish the ministerial advisory committees on the health technologies and healthcare benefits, and an accreditation framework for health service providers. The NHI will reduce inequalities in healthcare by ensuring that everyone gets fair medical treatment. Now, the NHI will save many lives by providing a package of services that include, for example, even more especially, maternal and newborn care and services also for people living with HIV, those with TB, and those suffering from non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. Our most immediate priority is to strengthen the health system and improve the quality of care. A vital part of this is the modernization, the improvement, and the maintenance of existing health facilities and the construction of new hospitals and clinics. A number of hospitals are under construction or are undergoing revitalization. Now, these include the Limpopo Central Hospital, the Siloam District Hospital in Limpopo, the Tlhabeng Regional Hospital in the Free State, the Bambisana District Hospital, Zitulele District Hospital in the Eastern Cape, and the Bupelong Psychiatric Hospital in Northwest. Now, our projects, rather other projects, are at various stages of design and development. Now, this includes the replacement of 3 existing new central hospitals, 5 new district hospitals, 5 community health centers, and a new psychiatric hospital. To improve patient experience, we are putting more emphasis on reducing waiting times, cleanliness, and staff attitudes in the public health facilities. We are encouraged by the great progress the country has made towards ending HIV and AIDS as a public health threat. By the end of March 2024, 96% of people living with HIV knew their status. 79% of these were on antiretroviral treatment, and 94% of these were on treatment with virally suppressed conditions. Now, to ensure that we reach the target of 95, 95, 95, which has been set by the World Health Organization, we will this year launch a massive campaign to look for an additional 1.1 million people who are not yet on treatment. We are concerned about the potential impact of the decision by the United States government to suspend some of its funding for HIV and TB programs in African countries for 90 days. Now, this funding that we get accounts for about 17% of our country's HIV spend. We have been able, over the years, to provide funding from our own resources, our own fiscus, for our HIV and TB programs. We are looking at various interventions to address the immediate needs and ensure the continuity of the essential services that we might lose if this funding does not come through. Now, to tackle inequality, we do need to undo apartheid special planning, which has scarred our country, our cities, and forced many people to live far away from areas of work and opportunity. We have delivered millions of housing opportunities since 1994, providing safety as well as dignity to poor households. Yet the practice of building housing developments on the periphery of urban centers has in many ways perpetuated inequality and urban sprawl. Going forward, we are going to build more housing in our city centers and closer to places of work and business. Now, we are redesigning our housing subsidies and directing more funding towards programs that enable people to buy or rent a home in an area of their choice. We will release more underutilized state properties for affordable housing development. And we are working with our provinces and metros, and I'm glad that a number of our premiers are here as well. We're working with them to reclaim buildings that have been hijacked in the city centers and repurpose them for public use. Now, we will provide 300,000 service stands to qualifying beneficiaries to enable housing development in well-planned, connected communities along key development corridors. We will clear the backlog of title deeds for subsidized housing, turning homes into household assets. And we will review land use, building, and other regulations to enable low-cost property development, including backyard housing. This represents a fundamental rethink of how the state delivers housing at scale while turning our cities into engines of growth and opportunity. In making our cities work for their residents, we will restore the remaining passenger rail corridors and stations to full service. More than 80% of passenger rail corridors have been returned to service. Now, PRASA has introduced over 200 modern, locally produced trains on its network to provide a low-cost option for public transport. Over the next 5 years, we will restore PRASA's signaling system so that we can put all our new trains to work and commuters can be assured that they can reach work safely, affordably, and on time. Now, we also want a nation in which everyone is safe. The police continue to work with other law enforcement agencies to dismantle organized crime syndicates and combat financial and violent crimes. The South African police has partnered with the metropolitan municipalities and continues to work with communities to fight crime in the priority provinces where crime is particularly high. Now, we are intensifying Operation Shanela. Shanela has been successful in arresting suspects, recovering firearms, and seizing stolen vehicles. And we must continue to tackle the scourge of gun violence that has continued to plague our society for decades. I have asked the Minister and the National Commissioner of Police to prioritize reducing gun-related crime and violence. Now, this includes preventing the diversion of firearms into the illicit market and recovering illegal firearms in circulation. We know from international evidence and our own experience that this is the most effective way to reduce overall violent crime. The detective service, which is crucial to solving cases, will expand by 4,000 personnel through the internal recruitment processes. And we are working on adopting surveillance, analytics, and smart policing solutions for modern law enforcement. We have seen the value of technology in fighting crime, and a number of countries that have opted to utilizing technology have made great progress. And by utilizing artificial intelligence in its fraud risk detection and verification work, SARS has prevented the leakage of over 95 billion rand in impermissible refunds. It has recovered 20 billion in revenue and dismantled an illicit tobacco and gold scheme. We continue to work across society to end the violence that is perpetrated against women. We have promulgated the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Act, establishing a national structure to oversee a coordinated response to this crisis. We will ensure that the Council is fully functional and properly resourced. We continue to strengthen support to victims of gender-based violence. There are now 65 Tutuzela centers across the country. Out of the 52 districts in our country, 44 have gender-based violence shelters. All police stations in the country now have victim-friendly services, and another 16 sexual offences courts will be established in the next financial year. Now, we want a nation that deals with corruption. Last year, we established the Investigating Directorate Against Corruption as a permanent entity of the NPA dedicated to investigating and prosecuting high-level corruption. We will ensure that the Directorate is fully resourced and have access to information that it needs to prosecute state capture cases and hold those responsible to account. We are establishing a world-class digital forensic lab to support the investigation of complex corruption and financial crime. We are making steady progress in implementation of the recommendations of the State Capture Commission, including signing into law several legislative reforms. The Special Investigating Unit and Asset Forfeiture Unit report that over 10 billion rand has been recovered in state capture-related cases. Now, this year, the Department of Justice and Constitutional Department will report on the review of the Anti-Corruption Architecture National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council. This is expected to streamline legislation to eradicate duplication of mandates and foster greater cooperation between law enforcement agencies. And we will finalize the whistleblower protection framework and introduce the Whistleblower Protections Bill in Parliament during this financial year. And this year, we will strengthen South Africa's system of dealing with terror financing and further legislative systems improvements. To secure our removal from the International Financial Action Task Force grey list, we have made significant progress in addressing the weaknesses that were identified in our law enforcement system, with 16 out of 22 action items fully addressed. We want a nation that is at peace with the world. We want to continue through our international relations to advance the well-being of the people of South Africa as we seek to advance the well-being of humanity. Now, we will work to strengthen our trade relations around the world and to leverage our strong and diverse global alliances to make our economy more resilient. The key pillars of our foreign policy remain the promotion of human rights, peace and friendship, and the strengthening of fair trade and investment ties with other countries. Now, these are the principles that guide our presidency of the G20 this year. We have chosen the theme of solidarity, equality, and sustainable development to underscore the need for cooperation and partnership amongst the countries of the world. For the first time in its history, the G20 is being hosted on the African continent. And this is particularly important following the admission of the African Union as a member of the G20. It is a great opportunity for us to place the needs of our continent and the rest of the global South more firmly on the international development agenda. Our G20 presidency is a valuable opportunity for South Africa to advance efforts towards greater global economic growth and sustainable development. Africa remains at the center of our foreign policy. We continue to work to strengthen the African Union, to support the achievement of peace, development, and economic integration on our continent. We know that our future prosperity is intricately linked and bound to the prosperity of the African continent. For South Africa to thrive, we must ensure that Africa does indeed thrive as well. And we must silence the guns on our continent. Now, since the advent of democracy, we've been instrumental in restoring stability in countries such as Cote d'Ivoire, Burundi, South Sudan, Lesotho. More recently, we've been part of the SADC peacekeeping mission in Mozambique that has brought relative calm and stability to the Cabo Delgado province. The presence of South African peacekeepers in the Eastern DRC is testament to our continued commitment to peaceful resolution of one of the world's most intractable conflicts that has gone on for years and that has cost millions of lives and displaced many people. Now, we call on all parties to embrace the current diplomatic efforts to find a peaceful resolution, including honoring the Luanda process. We will attend the joint summit between SADC and the East African Community scheduled to take place in Tanzania this weekend, where we will reiterate our call for a ceasefire and a resumption of talks to find a just and enduring solution, and we will make sure that our boys, our soldiers do come back home. We have always believed that the freedom that we won and the international solidarity from which we benefited does impose a duty on us to support the struggles of those who continue to experience colonialism and oppression. South Africa continues to stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine, who have endured decades of illegal occupation and are now experiencing indescribable suffering. And South Africa has acted in accordance with its obligations under the Genocide Convention by instituting proceedings against Israel in the International Court of Justice. We are fully committed to the articles of the United Nations, including the principles that all members should settle their international disputes by peaceful means. We support the principle of respect of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of all states and peoples. We continue to participate in the different peace processes seeking to bring about a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. South African delegations have been instrumental in developing a framework for negotiations towards a just peace in Ukraine based on the UN Charter and international law. Our country continues to advance its agenda of cooperation and multilateralism through its membership of the United Nations, the African Union, the Non-Aligned Movement, BRICS, and a number of other international bodies. As humanity confronts unprecedented challenges, we are determined that a reformed and representative United Nations must be at the center of global affairs, and we will continue to push for progress on the reform of the UN Security Council to be a more inclusive, more effective body that is able to ensure peace and security. And we will work to ensure that the needs of the people of the world are advanced. And the work that we do and what we stand for does need to be explained to many key players, especially to our trading partners and the many countries and leaders that we interact with on the global stage. And with a view of explaining the positions that we have taken, and in particular, the objectives that we wish to achieve during our presidency of the G20, I have decided to send a delegation of government and other leaders to various capitals on our continent across the world. This delegation will interact with various key players on a variety of matters that affect South Africa's interests. I will direct that they leave as soon as possible to interact with various key players on our continent and in the world, so that our presidency of the G20 objectives can be well explained. All these things that we speak of are possible. As South Africans, we know the power of cooperation, of what is possible when people of different backgrounds, different races, cultures, languages, and ethnic groups and religions come together behind a shared objective. The formation of the Government of National Unity provides us with an opportunity to show once again that we can achieve what we can achieve by working together. And I call on all South Africans, united in our diversity, to come together in the national dialogue that we are going to have, to define a vision for our country for the next 30 years. The national dialogue must be a place where everyone has a voice. It must be a place to find solutions that make a real difference in people's lives. The dialogue must reaffirm that each and every one of us has a role to play in building the nation that we want. We must therefore be builders and not people who seek to destroy the future of South Africans. While we may differ on many issues, we agree on one thing, that we need to build a better South Africa and improve the well-being of our people, and that we should do so not by sitting on the sidelines and shouting. We should be in the scrum working to develop the lives of our people. And so, as we enter the new era in the world and in our own country, let us speak of empathy, of compassion that we have for one another. Let us speak of the pride that we have of our country and all that we have achieved. Let us speak of the determination that won us freedom and drives us forward now to a better future. With this determination, we will work together to make this an era of growth, of progress and transformation. We will work together to build the nation that we want. And we will only be able to do it by working together and not by shouting together. And we will only be able to do it by ensuring that we as the leaders ensure that those who will come after us, our children and our great children, inherit a country that we have helped to build, not to destroy. Thank you very much.
Okay, Matthew. Okay, so that was President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation. If it seems like you may have heard it before, I think there's a good chance you may have heard it before. Kuhle, a lot to digest there, But the one thing that is clear is that Cyril Ramaphosa is in full chairman of the board mode. It seems like he feels like he's now running the country because the next G20 is going to be in South Africa.
True, Mike. I mean, basically, I think after 30 minutes into the speech, he went back to 2024 speech. I mean, we've heard these things before. It's not the first time we've heard them. I'm just grateful that he has ditched some things, some of these fake promises, if one could say the least, because he didn't touch on last year's smart city, which we were still waiting for. I wrote down a couple of his points. He said that there's going to be a transformation fund with 20 billion a year that is going to fund black-owned startups and enterprises.
Largely for women and disabled people.
True. And here's the thing. I think the issue comes in is we still have the same case of government throwing money at issues. We don't have a government that is actually upskilling people. It's one thing for me to give someone a car, but it's one thing for me to teach you how to make money to actually buy that car, So yes, you'll give people, 20 billion, but do they have the necessary skills to be able to be an entrepreneur? Another point you have to look at is the electronic travel authorization system, which will obviously include Home Affairs and the Department of Tourism. Now, it's been a long time coming. I mean, many countries have really moved to electronic visas. But it's going to be good for tourism, obviously. But I do think we do face a couple of issues. We still have an issue of corruption in that sphere, It's one thing to have a technological system to get into a country, but are we dealing with the root causes of, corrupt officials? There's nothing that was really said on corrupt officials in various departments. There's nothing that was really touched on in terms of, even the NHI. Yes, we understand it's for equitable health and for all of us to sort of be equal, if that's the case. But he doesn't touch on the proper way we're going to roll this out. Everything is sort of the final product, but there's no roadmap towards this utopia that President Ramaphosa is painting out for us.
There's, in the light of some of the things that have emerged over the last, the recent past, the last week or two, two things strike me quite hard. One is that very, very belligerent stance towards some of the points coming out of the new US administration. So doubling down on the race-based transfer of wealth, with this transformation fund, that's not going to please Trump or his supporters. And on the other hand, his own GNU partners who are getting a lot of flack from their supporters. Once again, doubling down on NHI, the transformation fund that we thought was half of it, we thought was a joke. We even had Toby Chance here from the DA said, nah, probably just not really going to happen. Well, it looks like these things are going to happen. Doubling down, the two areas where Ramaphosa is taking the most heat from his GNU partners, from the Western community, he's going head to head with them.
Well, look, I think firstly, this is the wrong script with the right crowd.
Yeah.
As in what President Cyril Ramaphosa has actually presented for this GNU, Many parties in this GNU, a number of parties, have been against the NHI. Speak of your IFP, speak of the Democratic Alliance. Even the Bella Bill is something that has been very contentious and something that the two major parties outside of the ANC, including the Patriotic Alliance actually, have come out to criticize. So it's funny enough because Fatal Adams actually just sent a message, He was saying that he doubts Ramaphosa will make it to the end of this year. And he was basically states here that he believes that the GNU should be made up of the Progressive Caucus because that is Ramaphosa's script.
Yeah.
That would have made sense, that this scripts that he has of progressiveness and transformation and all sorts would have actually matched the Progressive Caucus versus the right-wing parties that he's now partnered with, And yet again, it feels like were just out to make Donald Trump angry.
Yeah.
It really does. And it's nothing about saying I agree with Trump or not. It's about looking at our space, at our standing at a global level, to say that, we are here and we need to understand our place. You know, Donald Trump is the schoolyard bully, like you once mentioned, that this that we mentioned of a transformation budget, don't be shocked if Secretary of State Marco Rubio tweets about it tomorrow, because it seems like all diplomatic tensions are now being vented out on Twitter. So don't be shocked to see some.
Yeah. And of course, doubling down on the ICJ situation, the sort of big anti-Israel line, that's not going to play well in the Trump quarters. The real question is anybody in Beijing getting excited by this speech? Because obviously, that is going to be the big question to ask, is that it's fine to double down on an anti-American line. Great. But you need replacement. The obvious replacement, which we hear all over the show, is don't worry, China will come to our rescue. Do you think from the BRICS quarters that this is going to move the needle at all?
I doubt.
Can't see it.
I highly doubt. It's not going to happen. I mean, we've got to look. China at the moment, China is a country you once mentioned. The only thing they care about is trade. Whatever they do will be to benefit them. I mean, we've got to be honest, guys. How many clinics or what sort of type of investment has China done to really uplift South Africa by itself? And that didn't impact China positively, So I highly doubt much positivity will come from China. I mean, even David Ansara was speaking about there's no pepfra that will come from Beijing. I mean, so it's going to be important that, there's an old English saying that you should know where your bread is buttered. Which is a very important thing. Ramaphosa is in a beleaguered situation. He should know that currently Kagame, it's known, he's being backed by the West. That is pretty obvious. And it seems like all battles he is involved in on a global level pertain to being against the West. Now, this is not my opinion. This is purely factual. And we've got to look at, do we really think that as South Africa, this is the correct direction to take, especially knowing very well that we are by no means a communist society. Yes, we've got a few Karl Marx Fanonist people,
that drive German luxuries today.
Exactly. I mean, I was looking at some of my MK friends, they were taking photos in Mercedes-Benz Vianos, but outside of criticizing what really doesn't matter. But what's important is we need to go back to the drawing board. Our international relations, whoever's advising our government on international relations needs to really do a better job. I think, quite frankly. GCIS, I'll be honest, I feel like they failed us.
That's the Government Communication Service.
I feel like they failed us on this one in terms of explaining the expropriation bill. Because yes, number one, there was misinformation. It's not to say it's correct or it's the right way of dealing with land reform. It's got nothing to do with that. It's more about the misinformation part, which caused a lot of dispute between ourselves and the United States. So GCIS needs to go back to the drawing board in terms of how they publicize information. Another thing is South Africa needs to learn how to control the narrative. There's an old trick that I used to have when I was still deeply involved in politics. A friend of mine once told me, he says to me, Kuhle, whatever you do, you need to control the narrative. Otherwise, even if you're in the right, you'll be painted as if you're in the wrong. So the thing is, South Africa, we are very poor in controlling the narrative. And another thing is, President Ramaphosa touched on 10,000 students that will be funded, is it called the missing middle students that will be funded through whatever government scheme. Okay, so we once broke down this issue in, I think, our first episode of Political Insiders. There's 202,000 spaces in all varsities. This 10,000 out of the 202,000 spaces, if we have to exclude NSFAS and all sorts, only equates to about 4.5%. Now, tell me, Mike, when are we going to get there? I mean, 4.5 does not even touch 10%. So am I impressed? No, I'm not impressed.
I want to just touch on one thing, because obviously he was quite strident in saying that what they are going to do is release government land in cities to build low-cost housing. Once again, this is, it's obviously something that's going to come out of the blue for many of the GNU partners. They said they're going to roll out title deeds. We'll have to wait and see. That's also been a promise, but only for the last 30 years. What do you think of the idea of rolling out land in cities for low-cost housing?
Firstly, it depends where you roll it out, right? Let's be honest. We live in a market economy. There's a reason why, someone would build a house in, I don't know, Waterkloof or wherever it is, So we don't want to affect market value in terms of houses, because obviously once you bring in low-cost housing, that does affect the general suburbs market value. Now, I'm looking at this from a local perspective. But I do agree where Ramaphosa says that we should move this low-cost housing, or trying to move people into the city, to the CPD. That does make sense. But how do we get there, Mike? Because the CPD has already been taken out. I mean, it's not as if you can just build a new building in the CPD. I mean, It's already full. What you need to do is to go back and capture all the hijacked buildings. That is first things first. Because we've got a number of hijacked buildings that I think we have to be honest, our government has just been sitting and watching them. And it's only now where there's a thought from various quotas. I mean, I've heard Action SA speaking about, taking back hijacked buildings, which is a good thing, because those are the buildings that could be used for this low-cost housing. I've seen in Marabastad in Pretoria, under Celia Brink's administration, they actually released low-cost housing. You'll believe how cheap it was. You won't believe how cheap it was. It was actually 600 Rand a month. So this is also another avenue for government to create revenue. So that was a brilliant idea, but my big focus is on where you're moving these people to. Yes, we understand you want to move them from peri-urban areas to urban areas. Cool. But it's where in this urban area, because yet again, Mike, I won't lie to you, that it's like George Orwell's books, Animal Farm. It says some animals are more equal than others, So we live in a market economy. We don't want to disturb that, because we'll just be driving away investment.
Yeah. But we've certainly made an absolute fine art of spin doctoring in South Africa. We call it reclaiming hijacked buildings. That's basically a police work that should have happened the day somebody walked into the building that didn't own it. Should have been one phone call to the police station, and policemen should have ushered that person out. And President Ramaphosa crowing about 80% of our train stations being back up and running. How did you let it get to that point that people literally dismantled your train stations live on television? You watched it and did nothing about it.
I mean, Mike, it's crazy. I think at times, you find yourself as a South African clapping for a fish so that it can swim, And we shouldn't. These are the basic services or the basic duties that a government should be overseeing. You ask yourself what was happening in those oversight committees when parliamentarians used to go to train stations and also said, what was the conversation? Are we only waking up now in the year 2025 and realizing, oh, shoot, these are the problems? I mean, honestly speaking, it's a little too late, because, how long are we going to take? Other countries, I was literally watching this past week, the president of Angola, after his own State of the Nation, literally went to an airport in Luanda, their new airport in Luanda, opened a new airport and said that their airline, TAG Angola, has ordered more than 10, Airbuses and all sorts. And I was looking, I said, do South Africans really understand that we will be caught napping one day? That this idea of us being the most industrialized economy in Africa will soon
no longer apply. Yeah.
Exactly, to just evaporate. So the thing is, we need to improve on our security services. We need to include, countries like Dubai have got cameras on their streetlights. Now I'm digressing. But when we speak of stripping robots, or traffic lights, or stripping the lights and taking out cables, those are what the cameras should be dealing with. I mean, Mike, it's pathetic that we've got a society that keeps quiet and watches people just stripping robots. I mean, how will we improve development if this is how we're going?
Now, I want to just touch on a thing we mentioned off air, and that is a lot of these programs, a lot of the funding, business funding, is going to women. And he made a big point of that. We do run the risk here of really fanning the flames of gender-based violence. And I say that in that, not to say that we shouldn't fund women's business, but to really make that the thrust of it all, to me, is structurally unsound. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
I think, Mike, one of the big things is there's one thing that Donald Trump campaigned on, which was this anti-wokeism and, all sorts. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there should be no gender equality. Don't get me wrong. But the big mistake will always be when you leave a certain sector of the economy behind, which is one thing that we've seen our government doing over and over again. I mean, we've seen it through various acts that only promote a certain group in society and leave behind others. I mean, Mike, besides looking at women as an issue, I just want our viewers to understand we've got to look at colored communities and how they've been left behind. You've got to look at Indian communities and how they've... I mean, if you think a township is bad, you haven't been to a colored community, So it shows the nature of leaving certain communities behind or certain groupings of people behind and only focusing on certain people. It has never solved any issue. Hence, I've always said that, yes, as much as we've got BEE, cool, it's fair and well, because it's not a communist policy. Cool. But we cannot forget that our economy is made up of many other races, which also need to be equitably equipped to continue growing within the fifth industrial revolution. So what President Ramaphosa touched on, for me, it's I won't call it an electoral gimmick, but I'll say that it's a bait. It's just trying to make something sound cool and making himself sound like he's don't say freedom fighter, but
it is trying to get some cred. But ladies and gentlemen, stick around. I back Kuhle when he says he wouldn't be surprised if Marco Rubio, the new American Secretary of State, has something to say about the speech that we've listened to tonight. This flies exactly in the face of some of the problems that the Americans have, and that doesn't mean that we have to placate America, but there are the big guys in this in this game. We're going to hear from them. President Ramaphosa has certainly not tried to mend those fences. So let's see where this leads us.
True.
Kuhle?
No, I think...
Last word to you.
I think just looking at various political parties that have actually responded to my messages, I've gotten one from the spokesperson from Rise Ngcamane, speaking of their expectations. They were not too happy with the state of the nation, and that's funny because they're part of the GNU, but they believe that Ramaphosa didn't touch. Just want to read for you. They say that Ramaphosa didn't speak enough of dealing with officials, corrupt officials in high positions in departments such as DGs, CFOs, CEOs. Okay, that is, I mean, he did touch on it. I did hear, but he didn't go into length. He didn't elaborate on it. They also speak of Ramaphosa needed to send a strong message about our position in the DRC, as well as he needed to speak of the underfunding and corruption and mismanagement. That is what I'm hearing from Rise Ngcamane, as well as their last point was, it says, oh yes, leadership not just from the president, but equally from their public representatives. So one thing that I can say, Mike, is I don't think GNU partners looking at this, and I won't read everyone here, but I think it's worth touching on the DA, I guess, because they're a significant part in the GNU. The Democratic Alliance, speaking of the same thing that I was speaking of earlier on, here from their spokesperson, stating that they are not happy with the fact that Ramaphosa didn't touch on how we're going to decrease government debt. You know, that there was not really much touched on regarding government debt. He told us that that we want the economy to grow by at least 3%. You know, there was no clear roadmap as to what are we going to do. And yet again, there's a few chops and changes. In our last Sona, he spoke of introducing robotics and all sorts to schools and technology. But in this Sona, I would have expected him, or I would have wanted for him, to build on that and speak of how are we going to industrialize our economy in terms of preparing it for the fifth industrial revolution. He didn't say a word about that, not even once. So he spoke of mining. If Botswana recently came out not so long ago to say that they want to actually invest heavily on technology. And that was in their President's State of the Nation address, to say they want to invest heavily on technology to prepare themselves for the fifth industrial revolution. Our president has not said a thing about technology in tonight's speech. He has not said a thing about data costs, which affect many South Africans. So, am I happy with the speech? Not really. But I was very disappointed, like I said, around the 30th minute. I mean, I was happy in the beginning when he spoke of infrastructure and how much we're going to spend. But after 30 minutes, I felt like he sort of let us down again. And I think that is something that President Ramaphosa has to go and look at. And the next cabinet Kuhle, my advice is we need to go to the drawing board. Key things to fix, Mike, I think that we can agree on, is international relations, is to look at key economic what is it called again? Key economic industries that we can use to boost and to get to that 3% that he speaks of. Because what he was saying tonight, these are things that we've done before, largely. And, you know, like Einstein says, that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, you know, doesn't work. So overall, it was a promising speech around infrastructure, and as we predicted. So it shows, keep watching State of the Nation, because we're predicting some of these things around improving the airports, improving the harbors. That was cool. That was impressive. Around the issues of water, I hope Penny Majodina will really deliver on that. And it's not just, speech. And then the things that are just disappointing, obviously, are education and all sorts. That's perhaps the parting shot for me.
Well, I suppose the big difference between you and I is that you had expectations, I didn't. So I had very low expectations, and I have to say President Ramaphosa met my low expectations. The big takeaway, Kuhle has outlined it. I'm going to go with the fact that this is not going to please GNU partners, and it's not going to do anything about some of our international relations problems that we've got at the moment. Watch the news in the morning. Next couple of days, there's going to be some kind of pushback on this speech today. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that we've enhanced the experience of listening to the chairman of the board. And we'll see you again on the State of the Nation. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Kuhle. State of the Nation Business Breakfast, which is how